It's an odd time to be a Jon Moxley fan. In the past 12 months, he's gone from AEW's biggest villain to a hardened yet noble babyface and back to a despicable heel. It's led many fans to wonder, who is Jon Moxley? How are we meant to feel about him? Who is he supposed to be now? There is obviously no objective answer to these questions. The narrative of pro wrestling is often up to interpretation, dependent on what the viewer sees in it. But I do have an answer, if you're curious to hear it. To me, Jon Moxley has become a force of nature, more a concept than a man, thanks to choices he's made in his pursuit of power and fulfillment. To explain how and why, let's go over a brief history of Jon Moxley in All Elite Wrestling. Double or Nothing 2019, AEW's first official pay-per-view. The main event is Chris Jericho versus Kenny Omega, naturally. After all, the same matchup in New Japan Pro Wrestling was the first domino in a series of events that would lead to AEW's creation. Okay, that one tweet was the first domino, but this was still a very big and very consequential domino. At any rate, these two men represented the two major forces that got AEW off the ground. Kenny Omega embodied modern pro wrestling prestige, being regarded by many as one of the best wrestlers in the world. Chris Jericho, on the other hand, brought mainstream name value thanks to his WWE career, while harkening back to WWE's last major competitor, WCW. The match would end with a Jericho win, but more important was the aftermath. Through the crowd came a man who had both name value and prestige, the first person to choose AEW and its mission over WWE. Jon Moxley debuted, attacking everyone in sight, but especially Kenny. This came in the wake of Moxley's very public exit from WWE, during which he made public his issues with the promotion's creative process. His first promo carried this theme of frustration and of the catharsis that this new environment promised.
I'm alive! My heart is still beating and I'm breathing fresh air for the first time in a long time. My name is Jon Moxley, and I am on a mission to reclaim my soul. And I know I'm not the only one who thinks, it's about time this industry got a facelift. This is what you call a paradigm shift.
To him, I think, AEW represented what pro wrestling could be, or maybe it was simply the biggest place that would allow his desired brand of violence. Either way, Mox would quickly become the backbone of AEW. He was an exciting and unpredictable performer, and reliably made for great TV. He would become the promotion's second ever world champion in February of 2020, a famously chill time in world history. Just kidding. Pandemic. Mox was world champion during a harrowing time for everyone, but specifically for pro wrestling. And over 277 days, he would perform the thankless, or at least cheerless, job of closing the least attended wrestling shows to ever make the air. But Mox never seemed to mind the lack of crowds. One got the impression he'd be equally content wrestling in a backyard as he would in a packed stadium. This is where I got a lot of my appreciation for Mox as a performer. He was still so captivating, even when such a core element of wrestling was stripped away. This quality made him reliable, even in the most extreme circumstances. This would become a theme in Moxley's AEW career. Something's going wrong? Mox is always an option. The world champion's injured? Make Mox interim champion. World champ suspended? Belt up Mox again. The promotion's going through an identity crisis following backstage scandal? I'm sure some Mox can fix that too. But that's all booking stuff. As far as our character journey goes, here's where we're at. Jon Moxley's first AEW title reign ended at the hands of Kenny Omega. Afterward, Mox was kinda hanging out with Eddie Kingston, hanging out around the world title scene. Then, in late 2021, Mox would be taken off TV after the performer entered rehab for alcoholism. Mox would return to AEW in January 2022, cutting a passionate promo about his struggles, about vulnerability, about fighting demons. He closes with this.
You thought I was dangerous before. Shit. These days, all I drink is blood.
Now, obviously, this is a cool pro wrestling line, but if I could be pretentious for a moment, I think we can read this deeper as it relates to Jon Moxley's wrestling character. In 2019, Moxley endeavored to reclaim his soul, as he put it. When faced with a lack of career fulfillment, he filled that hole with wrestling violence. In this 2022 promo, he implicitly replaces alcohol with blood. He, again, invokes violence as a means to fulfill a need within himself. This paints the portrait of a man who derives meaning from combat, from conflict. This method of approaching lack, of approaching need, will define Moxley's character from this point on. At any rate, Jon Moxley was back, healthier and better than ever. He was presumably after the world title, but other than that, he was just here to fight. One could say Mox had a knack for taking action, but lacked in his ability to adequately formulate plans and goals. Enter Bryan Danielson. The American Dragon saw a kindred spirit in Jon Moxley. Bryan had a similar love for the art of wrestling violence. Bryan, too, had found himself on top of WWE, but at some point grew disillusioned with the company, and Bryan saw AEW as the promise of what wrestling could be. Yet, AEW didn't meet Bryan's famously high standards.
I know everybody here loves AEW, I get it, right? But there is no reason why some millennial cowboy should be the AEW World Champion. There is no reason why somebody dressed as a dinosaur should be an AEW World Tag Team Champion.
But the American Dragon had a plan to enact his vision of what AEW should be. Having faced down the end of his career once before, Danielson looked to the future.
If we wanted to take some of these young guys, somebody like Wheeler Yuta, you see, he's coming out here with jokes. What if we took somebody like Wheeler Yuta under our wings? What if we took somebody like Daniel Garcia away from 2.0 and we mentored him and we trained the future of professional wrestling together?
But Mox had different priorities. Over his career, he had never beaten Bryan Danielson. For all he knew, Bryan could be ducking him. Maybe this version of the American Dragon feared the purveyor of violence. And so, Moxley's terms were simple.
I don't stand side by side with nobody till I bleed with them first.
And so they fought at Revolution 2022. Moxley won, even if by the skin of his teeth. But the grapplers kept brawling long after the bell. Maybe these two weren't fated to coexist. Too explosive was their pride and passion. That would be, if not for the intervention of Lord William Regal. William Regal was a revered legend of technical pro wrestling. He had been a mentor to both Moxley and Danielson earlier in their careers. He shared Bryan's passion for technical wrestling and for teaching, and he reflected Mox's love of violence and shared his struggle with addiction. But most importantly, Regal was wrestling's most stalwart villain, and the villainous William Regal also saw potential in the future of AEW and the potential of this team. And so, Regal brought these mighty forces together in the name of shaping the future of AEW and of all professional wrestling. But this was a union overseen by one of wrestling's most vile ne'er-do-wells. They were likely to succeed, but nothing good would come out of this. The Blackpool Combat Club, named for Regal's hometown, had formed. They were instantly formidable, hell-bent to reshape wrestling into what it ought to be, an art form of beautiful violence. They set off to destroy everything light-hearted and entertainment-brained, and to recruit those worthy and smart enough to see their vision. The first convert was the young Wheeler Yuta, who betrayed the best friends, notably his former mentor Chuck Taylor, to be reborn in bloody combat as part of the BCC. Claudio Castagnoli would also debut for AEW as part of the faction at Forbidden Door 2022. For a more in-depth look at these events, I highly recommend Drop Mick Wrestling's documentary on the formation of the BCC. link in the description. For 2 years, the BCC wreaked havoc over AEW's landscape with no discrimination. They would target heels like the Jericho Appreciation Society and faces like the Best Friends. They didn't care about anyone's alignment, only about making themselves and others stronger through hardened combat. Moxley would hold the World Championship twice during this run. His third reign with the belt ended at Full Gear 2022 at the hands of MJF and William Regal. Yes, as one might expect, the venomous Regal betrayed the BCC because, I don't know, man. He cut a promo about it, but that boiled down to, I did it to do it, and now that I did it, it's done. Regal was leaving the company, that's basically why this happened, but perhaps we could see this as the beginning of the end for the BCC, as the one man able to bring them together stabbed them in the back. Maybe this was Regal's true final lesson to Jon Moxley. In pro wrestling, loyalty is worthless if it stands in the way of your goal. Moxley would ride with the BCC through 2023 and into 2024, but he would go on hiatus after a match with FTR in March. He wouldn't return to TV until August of that year, and something was different about the ace of the world. Though, to be fair, something was different about AEW, too. No longer was AEW the exciting new thing, the bold statement against wrestling's status quo. 2024 was year 5 of AEW's existence. The world where WWE was the only game in America was now a distant memory. AEW was as much a part of the status quo as any other promotion. This, combined with some notable backstage hullabaloo, put the company into a crisis of identity. Clearly, Mox had recognized this during his time away, and he had a plan to do what he'd done so many times before: save AEW and make it into the vision of wrestling it was meant to be. Mox's plan was simple: take the AEW World title and right the ship by any means necessary. This would be a crusade against the entire company, so he couldn't do it alone. He needed a vile cavalry. So, Moxley set out to find his Death Riders. He'd recruited Marina Shafir, an ex-MMA fighter who'd never quite found her place in AEW. With Moxley's support, she would soon become one of the most formidable people in All Elite Wrestling. As for the rest of the Death Riders, well, the BCC was built for this very mission. If Mox could convince them to join in, then his goal would be well in hand. There was just one problem: Brian. He was at a more sentimental stage in his career than when he had brain-birthed the BCC 2 years prior. The American Dragon was winding down his wrestling career and easing into a more benevolent mentor persona. He was just as formidable as he had ever been, but he was less likely to join in Moxley's malicious scheme. Worse yet, at All In 2024, Bryan Danielson won the AEW World Championship from Swerve Strickland. On the next Dynamite, Danielson, citing the neck issues that had caused his first retirement, made a condition for his title reign. Once he lost the championship, that was it. Danielson would end his career as a full-time competitor, and perhaps, in a perfect world, Mox could have waited for that to happen on its own. In a perfect world, some young competitor would topple Bryan Danielson, and Mox could test their worthiness to carry the company to salvation. This world is far from perfect, though. No one in AEW was willing or able to put Danielson down, and it's not like Bryan would just peter out on his own. You can't trust a dragon to wither away and die on its own. Dragons must be slain. Mox would have to recruit the other BCC members, Yuta, Claudio, and the newly joined Pac, to mutiny against their friend and mentor. The Europeans defected first. Claudio was affable under the right circumstances, but the super athlete had always favored might over sentimentality.
If you want loyalty, get a dog.
Pac was born a bastard, as most are, I presume.
I have been here since day dot, and I have always hated this place.
But then there was Yuta. Yuta Yuta was the closest to Bryan, who had filled a very paternal role in Wheeler's career, but this was a familiar crossroads. Yuta was drawn away from his mentors, his former friends once before, by the promise of greatness attained through combat. He made his choice then, and, as much as it hurt him, he knew his decision hadn't changed now. And so, Yuta, the pup, took that which had raised him and snuffed it out.
No! 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 Get the damn police! Get rid of these people! Good Lord! How much more can it take? The doctors come to ringside with a... And Darby Allin, take that moving! Restrained! Stop! Darby pleading! Stop! Stop to Wheeler Yuta!
With the dragon slain in his own den, Moxley took his ill-gotten gold and hid it from the world. The belt was a glorious item, a celebratory symbol of the promotion, and it's one that AEW, both its fans and its wrestlers, didn't deserve to behold.
It's not something you win. It's not something you hold. It's not something you show off. It's not something you hold up over your head. It's not something you post a picture with. It lives in here.
To Mox, AEW had become a complacent machine. It needed to wake up and find itself, lest its promise become a distant memory.
I have a dream of a land of opportunity, where people come to AEW and they can achieve anything they want. They can be the best version of themselves they can be. Wrestling gave me everything I have in the world. I want that for other people. 150 wrestlers on the roster with big fat paychecks and that junk in their hands. What are they supposed to do? Where are they supposed to go? Huh?
The Death Riders took control of AEW, decimating all who stood in their way, and it was... I mean, it could have been better. AEW could have done more to sort of convey this takeover story. The Death Riders killed Chuck Taylor. They killed Rampage, pro wrestling television show Rampage. Had a match with Cope. That was... ugh. If you want an in-depth look at my issues with this part of the storyline, that'll be available as a bonus video for my YouTube members. Memberships start at $2.99 a month, so if you want to support me and get some extra content as well, then there you go. At any rate, the Death Riders had beat down fans' morale out of kayfabe about as hard as they had beat down their peers in kayfabe. And while we can debate its quality, there's no denying that this torturous method of storytelling would ultimately pay off. For months, Jon Moxley and the Death Riders terrorized AEW's landscape. Show after show would end with another Moxley win off yet more Death Riders interference. It wasn't fun, it wasn't fair, it wasn't even that BCC-style iron sharpens iron type of combat. It was just constant, grating misery. That was until April 16th, 2025. Samoa Joe, Katsuyori Shibata, and Powerhouse Hobbs dethroned the Death Riders to become the new AEW Trios champions. It took the help of Willow Nightingale and Swerve Strickland, but just listen to the ovation when the win happens.
For Death Rider Joe, transitions in, Kikina clutches in!
The Death Riders had become very useful villains. They united both the roster and the fans against them, and became a lightning rod for all of their frustrations. No longer would AEW be saved by pushing this person or that person, or by airing out the punk hullabaloo, or by restoring the feeling, whatever that ever meant. No, the goal was to depose the Death Riders by any means necessary. Then, all would be right with the world. And so, it becomes easy to see the Death Riders as a beneficial force, a group of willing scapegoats whose inevitable downfall would benefit everybody. But was that really what Mox intended? It's genuinely hard to say. There's no moment at the end of this where Mox turns to his vanquisher and says, "Good job, kid. You passed the test." In fact, Mox will try to fight his way right back to the world title after he loses it. So if it's not to build the future and leave AEW in better hands, then What was this whole Death Rider scheme even for? Remember how I said Mox isn't fully equipped to formulate and carry out a plan? I think that comes down to two factors. One, to Jon Moxley, every problem is a nail. Conflict is what got him out of his career malaise. Violence is what called to him when he rebuilt his in-ring persona post-rehab. Jon Moxley has a single, narrow-minded view on problem-solving. Fight until it gets better. This coincides with Factor 2, zealous indulgence. Jon Moxley loves combat. He loves giving and receiving pain. Yes, he's doing all this to build the future and all that, but it's also worth doing just for how good it feels. Jon Moxley is happy like this. So yes, there's an end goal, but that'll probably take a couple years at least. Mox didn't quite lose sight of the goal, but it became very easy to trick himself into thinking that every violent indulgence was done in the name of that goal. So we can keep winning, whether by hook or by crook, and one day we'll just know that it's been enough. But there is no enough. All aspects of life, and especially wrestling, are defined by constant struggle. Moxley knows and believes that more than anyone. This is the model of the world that carried him through everything.
In the white hot fires of combat, in the white hot fires of struggle, I'm trying to build 1,000 Jon Moxleys. I'm trying to backfill them behind me, so I will put them through what I went through and worse. And that might not be pretty, that might be ugly, that might be uncomfortable, but that's the only way I know how to do it. That's the only way we know how to do it. That's the only way our generation knows how to do it. Struggle.
Mox derives joy and meaning from that conflict, but as a result, he has no concept of an ending. Well, there is one ending: complete destruction. The fight ends when you can't fight anymore. That's why they had to kill Brian. But this doesn't gel with the idea of building the future. And more importantly, it doesn't gel with the limitations of being a mortal person. Jon Moxley lost the world title at All In 2025 to Hangman Adam Page. It took the additional efforts of Will Ospreay and Swerve Strickland, and the interference of the previously vanquished Bryan Danielson and Darby Allin, but in the end, Hanger got it done. And Mox didn't go out on his shield, he didn't pass out or simply fail to answer the count of 10. He tapped out. Jon Moxley, purveyor of violence, ace of the world, champion of endless conflict, opted to end the bout. Granted, he was being hanged at the time, so it was understandable. Still, the facade of the unkillable Jon Moxley had been completely shattered. Most fans could assume where Mox would go from here. He had built this group of radicals on the promise of salvation through combat. Surely the Death Riders would sense this newfound weakness in their leader and oust him from the group. Such is the nature of heel wrestling factions. Either Claudio or Marina would take over the faction. Mox would take a break from AEW TV and return in a few months with a soft character reset. Such is the nature of wrestling TV. But then, something strange happened. The Continental Classic is AEW's annual winter tournament. It's round-robin style, with 2 blocks of 6 competitors. Each match has a 20-minute time limit, and, most importantly, absolutely no one is allowed at ringside. 3 Death Riders entered the 2025 C2. Pac, Claudio, and Moxley. Mox's downfall seemed further cemented with an early loss to his own lieutenant, Claudio Castagnoli. But from there on, against all expectation, Mox would wrestle a near-perfect tournament. He would suffer only one other loss across a month of action against Konosuke Takeshita. Otherwise, Mox went the distance with undeniable will and determination. It seemed this no-frills, just wrestling style of tournament had reawakened the more disciplined BCC version of Moxley. More than that, Mox seemingly had a complete change of heart. Here he is after winning the tournament. Just listen to this shit.
This thing here, this doesn't belong to me. This thing here, the Continental Championship, it belongs to everybody in this Continental Classic that busted their ass. This belongs to the fans who support professional wrestling, who pay their hard-earned goddamn money to come out here. And we owe it to them to give everything we have every time we step foot in a ring, no matter where it is. I owe it to those people.
That's very inspiring, John, but a month ago, you were a domestic terrorist. Yet it does make some sense, right? From day one, Jon Moxley in AEW has been a man who finds and refines his soul through the art of wrestling. Of course, a more benevolent Jon Moxley would emerge from a structured, sportsman-like wrestling tournament. As the C2 winner, Mox was now Continental Champion, a belt that has the same rules as the tournament matches. 20-minute time limit, no interference. And so, for a few weeks, Moxley carried himself as this straightforward, technical babyface, facing all comers weekly on TV. Is this it, then? Does Jon Moxley get to ride out like this, as a champion testing his mettle under ideal conditions? Does Jon Moxley get to know peace? Well, did Danielson? A few weeks ago, Will Ospreay returned after being taken out by the Death Riders. He received a hero's welcome and set his sights on Mox and his band of brigands. For his part, Moxley didn't hesitate to try and murder Will again. Like it was nothing, Mox was back to being a bastard. What is going on? Jon Moxley isn't a man anymore. That is, at every given opportunity, he has willfully cast off every quality that would make him human. Loyalty, compassion, glory, mercy. Jon Moxley has filed down his being until only one quality remained: conflict. Jon Moxley has become the embodiment of the thing he believes saved him time and time again. There was a time when Jon Moxley looked at his home promotion with care and concern, but his life and line of work had only taught him one way to deal with those feelings: combat. And so, his mission ate away at him until only combat remained. And when he came out the other end, when he got the closest he could to redemption, there was nothing left to salvage, because the man, the thing on the other side, couldn't recognize, let alone reconcile, his gravest sins. The blood of the dragon had been on his hands for so long that he wore them like gloves. He had taken Wheeler Yuta, his son, down such a dark path that the once promising wrestling prodigy was unrecognizable. He had brought so much terror to the promotion he so loved that it could never love him back. Perhaps Moxley could be its king, certainly its tyrant, but never its savior. And yet, for how heavily it corrupted him, Moxley's path of violence was rewarded time and time again. This is wrestling, after all. The mighty stand tall regardless of their justification. Maybe that system of reward is why Mox couldn't feel himself go from using his art as a guiding light to becoming a blood-fueled, zealous lunatic. Or maybe this is simply the essence of Jon Moxley's soul, and he's done what he set out to do back in 2019. Jon Moxley is my favorite wrestler, so when I look at him, I see the very nature of professional wrestling, and professional wrestling is a never-ending story, an infinite conflict. So long as we can build rings and gather people to watch, there will be wrestlers pretend fighting for any given reason. In kayfabe, in my eyes, Jon Moxley is that natural quality of wrestling, and so he changes depending on the context around him. Against some opponents, he's an opportunity to learn and to better oneself through hardship. Against others, he's an unreasonable avatar of chaos, a masochist bringing punishment simply because he can. But Jon Moxley will never truly be a hero again. He gave up that possibility when he killed his friend for a belt he didn't even want to wear. And this conclusion may become horribly dated. I don't know Moxley's exact future. I could be proven dead wrong a mere week from now. Such is the nature of wrestling. All I know is that right now, Jon Moxley doesn't read in his feuds as a person with his own ambitions or vulnerabilities. Instead, he is simply a force of nature, a fact of life to be overcome, for better or for worse. So if you're whining about, I'm confused, is he a face or a heel? Then you can fuck off. Thank you for watching what turned out to be a monster of a video. I originally started working this as a way to wind down from all the WWE coverage I was doing, And then the script turned out to be like 4,000 words. Oops! And it turned into the biggest video I have ever done. But if you enjoyed this and would like to see more like it, then you can incentivize me to do more work like this by supporting the video, like, comment, subscribe, and if you want to do a little extra, you can become a member of the channel. At the lowest tier, you'll get your username shown on screen, like my 2 supporters here, which I'm pretty sure are my parents, so if you want to make that whole situation a little less sad, then join on in. Members will also get access to exclusive videos, like that problem with the Death Riders video I mentioned, which should be uploaded within a day of this video going public. I'll also be uploading show reviews, and maybe some other small things that I don't really want to put on the main feed. But even if you just want to subscribe, I have a lot more content planned like this. I am gonna do one on Orange Cassidy, gonna do one on Tony Storm. I don't know when those are coming, but should be relatively soon. And if you have any other characters, topics, or arcs you want me to cover, please let me know in the comments below. That's about all I got for you. So again, thank you for watching. Goodbye.